Today we have with us Mr. Merlijn van Essen, representing PureLoop Recycling Machines, and it is a company of EREMA Group. Hello, Merlijn, and thank you for joining us today.
Hello, and thank you for the invitation.
Nice to have you.
Thank you.
So, designing machines with recycling in mind is definitely the key to maximizing the recovery of plastic waste and minimizing environmental impact, right?
Yeah, exactly. EREMA Group is now in business for 40 years. We have different technologies in-house where we are able to mechanically recycling different types of plastics.
Okay.
EREMA is our sister company who is specialized on mainly post-consumer recycling. PureLoop is mainly focused on in-house recycling, and we have other companies inside of the group which are focused on different applications as well as chemical recycling, de-inking, or other technologies.
It's located in Austria.
Yeah, we're located in Ansfelden. Yeah, Upper Austria, in Ansfelden.
So on this World Environment Day in Pakistan and globally, we want to help raise awareness on the role of plastic recycling and its impact on sustainable circular plastic economy to benefit from the term design for recycling. This is D4R, right?
Yeah.
So what steps do you think Pakistan should take to make recycling on plastic possible?
Basically, there are a couple of things. First of all, which is one of the more important, is to look at the amount of plastics already at your disposal. I've been a couple of times to Pakistan, and basically, if you look in the streets, there's quite a big amount of plastic available. And this is actually also the image which people have in mind when we talk about plastic. It's this plastic in the ocean, it's the plastic on the street. And one of the reasons why it's there is because people are not educated to deal with these plastics. There is no infrastructure to deal with these plastics. Although there would be a very simple solution to this all. If we look at the Pakistani population, there's still quite a lot of people who live under a certain, I would say under $1 a day. And it could be a very simple thing to educate these people how to collect this plastic in the streets. And basically let recyclers pay them, for example, €2 a day. Because in that case, people would be very interested and very applied to basically collect this plastic and say, bring it to a certain place, but they need the education for it. So a recycler should actually educate them and tell them, well, you have to collect this type of plastics because it can be used in regranulation, for example.
So local as well as federal government should use their influence to make it happen.
I think there is a big possibility in Pakistan to make this happen, both on local skills, but also on international skills. If I look, for example, at the European Union, which is now obliging companies to use at least 15 to 30% of recycled materials into packaging, for example, it's a law which is going to be implemented in 2025. However, the interesting thing is that actually the amount of plastic being recycled in the European Union, or the amount of recyclers we have in the European Union, are not able to cover the demand which is coming in 2025. So we're going to need to rely on countries like Pakistan or Middle Eastern companies or African or China to basically provide us with recycled materials.
My another question, Merlijn, policymakers in Pakistan thinking to put a ban on plastics. So do you think this is a solution? If not, then what could be the possible solution to encourage and promote three R's? let's reduce, reuse, and recycle concept. What do you think?
So basically, simple question. Would a hospital be able to provide services if plastics would be banned? No, not at all. There's a huge amount of plastic in the medical industry. There's a huge amount of plastics in aeronautics, in automobiles. In all day life, we see plastics. Now, yes, of course, it would be good to reduce and reuse these materials. This is definitely one of the things that we're going to have to look into, because do we really need a shopping bag to bring our stuff home if we take 2 bottles of Coke? No, not really. We don't need a plastic bag. We can actually take it in our hands. So it is one of the things where actually consumers are going to have to think about their actions, and also about the consequences they have. Because the biggest problem is, nowadays people are not really thinking about the consumption of plastics. However, if they start thinking about their kids, do they actually want to put and bury their kids into mountains of plastics? I don't think so. If we look
Exactly.
at history, if we look at religions, religions are always telling you shouldn't put your waste in front of your doorstep. Then why are we
Exactly.
all putting the waste in front of the doorstep? It is something we should actually try to prevent. So a ban on plastics, will it help? No, absolutely not, because we would be thrown back in the Stone Age. Do we have to start to reduce and reuse? Yes, absolutely. We have to, because the resource oil is running out at a certain period. And basically, it would be very good if people could actually start to design their packaging to be reusable, car parts to be reusable. And one of the ways that is possible is, for example, monomaterials.
Great. True. So, my next question, Merlin, what initiatives or partnership do you have in place to promote responsible and sustainable use of recycled plastics? So how do we collaborate and stakeholders across the value chain to drive the adoption of recycled materials?
Basically, we have a couple of partners in our contact, so to say. What we mainly do is we are in contact with other machine builders. So, for example, blown film producers, injection molding producers, different companies which are, interestingly, a lot of big companies actually are around the areas of Germany and Austria. And we actually talk quite a lot also with governments. We talk with universities. We talk with different stakeholders in the whole area. And basically, what everybody is now trying to do, for example, in Europe and the US, is going more towards monomaterials. Why monomaterials? Because monomaterials are quite easy and simple to recycle all over the value chain. And this is the most important thing, that it doesn't matter if you need to recycle your production waste or if you need to recycle your post-consumer waste. Post-consumer meaning the consumer has actually touched it. If the materials are designed for it, then it becomes quite easy. It's just a question of collectioning it. So yes.
Like bottles you talk about.
Yeah, for example.
Right?
For example, bottles is one of the things which is very easy to recycle, and you can recycle it endlessly. However, currently what we're seeing is a little bit of an abuse and greenwashing of bottle recycling. It's, for example, a lot of people inside of the textile industry are using bottle flakes to make fibers out of it. Now, is this recycling? No, not really. It's deturning the purpose of a bottle into something else. Is it convenient? Yes, absolutely. But the problem is going back towards a bottle, if you have fibers, it's not possible. And currently, fiber-to-fiber recycling is one of the things that we're going to show on the EREMA show, for example, because you should also think, if we talk about plastics, about the clothing industry and fast fashion and those kinds of things. This is one of the industries which has not been looking into recycling yet. They are just starting. So we are actually showing on the EREMA show in Italy this week. We're showing a fiber-to-fiber recycling. But again, these are products which are made with different companies and different producers and different brands, really to be recycled in any stage of the process.
I think you heard about Coca-Cola in Pakistan. They use recycled bottles to make road in Pakistan's capital, Islamabad. Have you heard about it?
Yeah, I heard about it. It's really a shame that they actually use bottles to make roads out of it, because the thing is, a bottle can be recycled almost endlessly. And the thing is, there is machinery, for example, from our sister EREMA, which is specialized on really doing bottle-to-bottle recycling, where you actually have an FDA food approval, you have an EFSA food approval, you have brand approvals like Coca-Cola's, like Pepsi's, and so on, which basically means that if you take a bottle, which is polyester or PET, as we call it, different types of names. This material is then chopped into small pieces. It's washed in a hot washing machine. Afterwards, it's put into what we call a vacuurema or vacuumite, which is a special system, which is remelting this plastic at temperatures between 260 and to 280 degrees C, which means if you're scared about contaminations or plastics or bacteria, don't worry. At 280 degrees, everything is basically out. And afterwards, we're able to re-increase the natural or the virgin levels, which are required to make a bottle out of it again. So can you recycle bottles? Yes, 100%. Absolutely no problem. The only thing why people are not doing it is because there is not enough education about it. There's not enough awareness that if you throw a bottle into nature, that it's not going to come back to a bottle. It's going to lay there for multiple years before it finally ends up somewhere in the soil. And this is something that we should change. Also, in Europe, we have the case that there's still not a lot of information, but also in Pakistan, what I've seen, there's not a lot of information nor education about this topic.
So, Merlijn, you talked about US, you talked about Europe, about partnership. What about Pakistan?
Currently, we have a couple of partners in Pakistan. So we have a couple of big bottle-to-bottle recyclers who already have our technology, who are already reusing the materials. We have a couple of post-consumer recyclings, which are already using our machines to basically recycle polyolefins, for example, big bags and things like that, to feed it back to big bags.
So do you have any partnership on government level, provisional or federal?
Currently not on a governmental level. We have been talking several times to government bodies to basically explain them about the advantages or the needs of recycling. However, this has always been quite tough to understand.
For Pakistan.
On a Pakistani level, yes, because the question is always, who is behind it to really say, well, I actually see a market potential into this and I'm investing the money. That is one of the things that's currently missing. So, but yes, we have done a couple of roadshows. We have done multiple webinars and things like that in Pakistan to basically educate people on plastic recycling and what is possible.
I think it works like public-private partnership. You know, if it works, then the project will go on. Otherwise,
Definitely.
only government level, you can't go about it.
Absolutely not. It's also always a little bit on, there are countries, for example, where it's banned to recycle PET bottle to bottle.
Yeah.
It's just banned by law, because
Yeah.
the government doesn't have really an idea of what is possible nowadays, because they simply don't have the time or don't want to take the time to be
Yeah.
educated on these kinds of things. And this is something that we are always willing to do.
Hope for the best, Merlin.
Let's just pray that they wake up quite quickly, hopefully tomorrow morning,
Yeah.
and say, well, we
I think
need
this is
more
a high time
information.
for the Asian countries as well.
Yeah,
This is a high time.
definitely. Definitely.
So, Merlin, my next question, besides environmental responsibility, what are other incentives for brand owners to design packaging materials with the concept of recycling?
Basically, it's the brand image.
Yeah.
That is one of the most important things. Because if you now look at what is possible, let's take an example of multi-layer packaging. Now I'm talking about multi-layer packaging always has a sheet of polyethylene, then PET in the middle, and polyethylene on the bottom. This is, for example, multi-layer. 3 layers, you have 9-layer packaging, 10, 12, and so on and so on. It depends on the application. Because what does the consumer want to have? They want to be sure that if they buy cheese, for example, that the cheese is going to be kept cool and that there's no air coming inside, but the humidity can actually go outside so that they can actually put it in their fridges home and then use it. Now, what have we done with a lot of machine producers? We have started to look at, do we really need all these barriers? Because these barriers are actually the problem when we talk about recycling. Why is it a problem? If I take my layer of PE, which melts at 140 degrees C, and I take a layer of PET, which melts at 260 degrees, I have a difference in melt temperature of around 100 degrees C, which then actually means that the polyethylene is going to be burned. It has a different behavior, for example, in the recycling line. And at the end of the day, you finish with a pellet, which is, well, a pellet, but you never know which mixture is inside. So you can't really feed it back into films, for example. So back into packaging. You could go back into injection molding in some cases, but this is very tough generally. So why is it important for the brands to start actually doing what they're pledging? Because they're all pledging, yes, our material and our packaging is recyclable. But if I look at most of the packagings, it's absolutely not recyclable. Yes, you can make a pellet out of it, but it's not a recycling machine. It's just downgrading the quality. So if they want to do recycling, they should actually start to use mono materials where you're really able to say, okay, I have my packaging and I feed it back into the same type of packaging. There is in Europe, they're currently placing legislations which is obliging people to use at least 15 to 30% of recycled content in packaging. So flexible and rigid packaging. The difficulty is always of these packagings that the consumer is used to having transparent packaging, which is unfortunately not always possible if we talk about, well, packaging which has been recycled. Because I actually have a packaging of tissues next to me. So if you simply look at the colors on here, you have red and blue. So at the end of the day, there is actually a bluish pellet coming out of a recycling line if I recycle this, because it's 100% PE, so I can recycle it. If I put back this bluish pellet in a film, it will come out slightly bluish grayish. Now, the consumer nowadays is conscious that we should actually use recycled material, but everybody's going to say, yeah, it's tissues, but the packaging is not completely transparent. So I'm not sure if this is okay.
Yeah.
And this is something that we're going to have to learn and educate people about, that actually the packaging, yes, okay, it's not completely transparent, we know. But in the process, and there the government plays into it because they're going to have to put into place certifying levels, that actually a recycler can recycle the material and it can be reused in packaging. But it is maybe not perfectly transparent. Is it important? No, absolutely not. It's not a problem as long as you can read the name of the brand, if you can read what is on there and what is inside. That's the only thing.
So, Merlin, what about solid waste management? Solid waste management is a big area of development for Pakistan and Asian countries, right? So, what advice would you have for municipal authorities?
So municipal authorities could actually, what we have in quite a lot of countries in Europe and some in the US, also some in the Middle East, actually people start, or municipalities actually started to collect the waste.
Yeah.
They have a waste collection system. Why do they have a waste collection system? Because at the end of the day, the municipalities are actually collecting this waste and selling it to recyclers. So they're actually earning money on it, which is, in my opinion, not a bad idea, because then at least the municipality can afterwards say, hey, I have clean streets, which increase the life, or basically the willingness of people to live in that certain community. It makes the image of the community better. And basically gives also a possibility to the community to invest money in different applications. So invest more in waste treatment, invest in clean water, invest in different kind of things which are important to human health.
And I think community means we have to, first of all, digitize that concept as well as privatize that concept, right?
Yeah.
Because you have to involve private sector in this project.
Sure, you have to involve the private sector. As I mentioned before, the private sector, there's more than enough money to earn in post-consumer recycling. It's going to be something that is going to be implemented worldwide at a certain point. Of course, it's going to take a little bit of time before it will all be running. But the thing is, if we don't do it, and if we continue at the pace we're continuing at the moment, then most probably in the next 100 years, we will have more and more natural catastrophes. Life will become almost unbearable. And the question is, do you then really still want to put kids into the world? To live in basically what would be called a plastic hell? Because nobody did something about it.
Yeah, true. So, in like Pakistan, more than 230 million is an average consumption of about 7 to 8 kg plastic per person per annum.
Yeah.
So, with a growth rate of double digits, what should be some immediate fixes to deal with this threat to environment?
Well, I think we mentioned a couple of them. First of all, reduce and reuse is one of the things that should be one of the first steps. However, this can't be done without the government basically pointing and educating people to do so. So this means the government is going to have to be educated what is actually bringing a extra value towards recycling plastic, cleaning up the streets and things like that. So that afterwards they can actually educate and help people to do something about it. And then as soon as people get educated, and as soon as you have initiatives, like I mentioned in the beginning, where people who are living under €1 a day or $1 a day would earn a little bit more money, let's say €2 a day or $2 a day, by collecting plastic and bringing it to certain collection points, this would actually give those people a possibility to invest more money into the country, which means the government is going to receive more taxes, which allows to invest more money and to
You're talking
become
about
more viable.
investment.
Yeah.
So Merlin, you're talking about investment. So how much investment do you foresee in coming years for this investment?
So basically, to give you a little bit of an idea, because this is always a question I get, yeah, is recycling really feasible? Is it interesting? Let me give you a couple of figures. So to do, for example, post-consumer recycling, what you actually need is, you need, of course, to collect the material. So this is going to be an ongoing investment. Afterwards, you need shredding, you need washing, and you need pelletizing systems. You need, of course, a certain amount of area where to do this and so on. At what capacity does it make sense? We always talk about at least 1 ton an hour. You need approximately 1 ton an hour so that a project like this becomes feasible. What would be the investment in such a project? We're talking roughly between 8 and 10 million euros for an investment. And this is basically the machinery and things like that. When do you see a return of investment? Generally, the return of investment is within 2.5 to 4 years, depending, of course, on quantities, on availability, and also on the market that is currently available.
That was my last question, Merlin, and thank you so much for your time. It's a really very knowledgeable interview and conversation with you have. We'll see you soon again, and I hope we'll see you in Pakistan very soon.
It was a pleasure. Thank you very much for the questions. This was really interesting. I hope it helps a little bit to make recycling understandable. And yes, I hope to be able to come to Pakistan soon again and to hopefully talk and have meetings with the government to better inform them about the possibilities and the feasibilities of these kinds of projects.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Merlin. Thank you
You're
so
welcome.
much. Good day.
It was a pleasure, and
Good
hope
day.
to see you soon again. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Have a good day. Bye.